Welcome to the Sweat Elite podcast, or welcome back. If you are a regular listener, Matt Fox here with my colleague Luke Keogh with another episode of the Sweat Elite podcast. And we're going to do something a little bit different today. I felt like it was timely to talk about the topic of who is the greatest male distance runner of all time, a debate that comes up from time to time. I thought it was timely because Kipchoge obviously recently just announced that he was sort of stepping away from at least competing at the very elite level. He mentioned that he's going to continue to compete in the marathon, but he won't be really challenging for the win in these races anymore. So I thought we'd discuss this because it's something that pops up from time to time, and it's a bit of a fun thing to talk about. I always enjoy hearing the Triathlon Hour analyze who are the greatest triathletes of all time. They tend to dive into that topic every now and then. And we'll also speak a bit about Kenyans, Ethiopians, East Africans in general, and their dominance in the sport, and if the Americans, Asians, and Europeans can ever sort of bridge the gap to compete with them at a sort of quantity mass level at any point, and so forth. So we'll dive into both those topics. And I also, over on the Shareholders Club podcast this week, we are going to dive into the training of British marathoner Phil Sessman, who recently lowered his marathon PB to 2:07:18. He's doing something very interesting at the moment. People listening might know, but he's attempting to run back-to-back marathons, Amsterdam and 7 weeks later, Valencia. So he ran his 2:07:18 at Amsterdam Marathon a couple of weeks ago, and I went deep into his training log and fleshed out a whole lot of insights into what he's been doing. We'll talk about that over on the Shareholders Club. But Luke, thanks for joining me. Always appreciate you being on the podcast. And let's first talk about the greatest male distance runner of all time. In your mind, how would you determine this? What sort of factors or what sort of parameters would you use to analyze the greatest distance runner of all time?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard. I would, there's obviously a few things, right? I think, obviously success is the top of the list, right? But it would have to be sustained success, right? Consistent success, because it's one thing to win a big race or win a gold medal here or a championship there and then kind of fall off a bit and be inconsistent. It's another to, that's a sign of a really, really good runner versus a great, top of the pile, world class, elite of the elite runner would be doing that at a consistent level and managing to stay. A big part of it doing that is, the longevity that I'm talking about has to do with, and I feel like this isn't talked about enough, staying relatively injury free.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that's a big part of, I know it's a weird thing to say that you would add that into, a GOAT argument or whatever it might be. But in running, it's so important. Like it's so important, way more important, I think, than any other sport. Of course, it's important in all sports, but it is so important in running. Like you get yourself like out of competition for a while with a couple bad injuries, like that can be so detrimental. Versus, and what I mean by that is why I think it's so important. Versus, you think of like athletes that are at the top of the cream of the crop in team sports, like soccer players, basketball players, American football players, whatever. They can still get their teams, they can kind of fall off, have a bit of an injury, have a bit of downtime, and their team can still, take that trajectory forward. And then they can come in and they can play, play a half here, play a quarter there, build up easy and easy. And the team is still success, still rising. And they can kind of still hold on to those coattails, get fit, get back, get the momentum going again, and then boom, they're back. Can't do that in running. It's all on your own back. Your success is, purely determined by yourself. Yourself and your team, your coaches. Obviously, I'm not trying to take anything away from the coaches, but from you. It's an individual sport, and so yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And so I always look at the consistency, the longevity of the success, and with that obviously will come health in the most simplest term.
Mm. It's interesting that you say that because when I went to dive into, the answer to this, I sometimes mention that I use AI to search for these things. And of course I did. And I used Grok, ChatGPT, and Gemini, and they actually all came up with different answers. But the three people that came up first, second, and third on all three of those AIs were the same. They were Eliud Kipchoge, Kenenisa Bekele, and Haile Gebrselassie. Now, many people listening to this podcast probably don't even know who Haile Gebrselassie is. I'm hoping that many people have at least heard of him, but he
I'm certain.
dominated. Yeah, it depends. If he got into the sport after, because so many people got into the sport after COVID, for example, and I think those people might have at least maybe heard of his name, but maybe didn't realize or don't realize how dominating he really was back in the late 90s and early 2000s. But the
Yeah.
reason why I say it's interesting that you mentioned the injury thing, Kenenisa Bekele, who is widely recognized to be the greatest male distance runner of all time, by many people that were sort of focusing in on running as a sport in sort of 2005 to 2012, where he really dominated especially over the 5K and 10K. He's an example of someone that was crippled by injury in the second half of his career when he transitioned to the marathon.
Yep.
And he was, if you really look at his career, stepping back and zooming out, his career was unbelievable from 2005 through until 2011. He was, winning everything. He said, we'll go through all the statistics in a minute. And he actually has by far the highest win score. And what I mean by win score across the three is Olympic gold medals, World Championship gold medals, World Championship cross country gold medals, and major marathon wins. Kenenisa Bekele scores first by a long shot. But the reason why he maybe falls short on winning, on being determined as the greatest male distance runner of all time, is because he was injured so much of the second half of his career and never really, dominated on the roads really at all in the marathon. Of course, he had a couple of world major marathon wins. He got very close to the world record at Berlin Marathon in 2019, I think it was, when he just missed Kipchoge's world record. But when you think about the other two athletes that I mentioned, Kipchoge and Gebrselassie, those guys seem to basically remain injury free their whole career. So
Yeah.
yeah, Bekele was really, really, crippled by the injuries in the sort of last, and he's still going. Obviously, he lined up at New York Marathon a couple of weeks back. Unfortunately, dropped out. But yeah, it's a good point that you make. Injury and staying sort of healthy is such a big part of it, and it's basically impossible to win this if you've struggled with injury for half of your career. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And then what do you think about that in terms of Bekele's injuries? And I say injuries because, of course, they're injuries, but we've seen so often when he went over to the marathons that he seemed so laxed in his preparations, right? Like he would get told, "Hey, you've got a major coming up. We're going to pay you buku bucks. Like, get over there." And his training just seemed to be like, okay, he'll do a bit and then just like kind of last minute it and just be like, all right, get ready. Obviously, that wasn't for all of them, but we've seen it so many times in his marathon career.
Mm.
Not previously, but in his marathon career, where it seemed like he just, we've talked about this before. Where he seems like hyper focused on his non-running ventures, his businesses, which is fair,
Mm.
But like, what do you think about that? Like, do you think maybe that plays a part in why he has been has had a bit of a rockier latter part of his career and things like that?
Yeah, it's impossible for us to know without really speaking to his sort of coach and managers as to
Right.
why he keeps doing that. But it is strange that so often he is added to the start list of these major marathons so late. It's so
Yeah.
frequent that he's added to these lists. New York, I think it was announced a couple of weeks before. Berlin Marathon, he's been mentioned, as starting only 2 to 4 weeks before many times. And, it's sort of a famous story out there that in 2019, when he ran 201.41 and just missed Kipchoge's world record at the time of 201.39, he managed to stay injury free for 7 weeks, trained consistently, and ran what he did. He almost broke the world record. I
Mad.
don't remember back then when he was added to the field, but yeah, it's very his marathon career has been an interesting one in that you almost never hear of him being in the fields 10 weeks to go, which is when they typically do announce fields. Like they just announced Valencia Marathon fields now, even though that's in a few weeks, but they did mention preliminary fields a few months back, about a month back. They've added a few recently, but yeah, it's very common for him to be unsure, seemingly, if he's going to race at all until very close, and that might be as a result of him struggling with reoccurring injuries and just not being very confident in knowing if he'll get through the training block uninjured. I'm not sure. It's something that it's probably impossible to know without really directly speaking to his coach and manager. But with that said, I'll go through quickly how I scored the three athletes. So I broke everything down into the categories of Olympic gold medals, world champs, golds on the track, world champs, golds cross country, world major marathon wins, and then a total win score. Then I looked at the world records for all three, how many times they broke the world record and how long they held the world record for. I think that's pretty important. Any additional things that they did? So, for example, Kipchoge obviously ran sub 2 in the non-official Ineos Challenge in 2018. And then any comments around sort of longevity? How long were they competing at the very top level? So I put some data into that as well, and overall impact on the sport. So yeah, when you rank them like that, it's interesting because, as mentioned before, Kenenisa Bekele comes out on top with 22 wins in total. He won 3 Olympic golds in 5K and 10K in 2004 and 2008. He won 5 world championships on the track in 2009, 2003, 5, 7, and 9 in 5K and 10K, 1 in 5K and 4 in 10K. But he also won, this is where Kenenisa Bekele really stands out. He won 12 world championships in cross country. And some people might feel like they don't want to include world championships in cross country in the tally. And if you took that out, it'd be a very different picture. But it is, we do have to include them. They are part of world athletics and they are a big deal. Yeah, Luke.
Why? Why do you think people would not want to include it? What do you think?
I don't know. I feel like it's a good question. Maybe I'm thinking about that incorrectly, but I feel like a lot of people maybe don't really put it in the same category. It's almost like I don't know. It doesn't seem right to call it a different sport, but it does almost feel like it's sort of a different sport at the same time. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I'd include it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I'm
Because
saying that we do include it. Yeah.
yeah, top runners show up. The top of the top show up. It's a legit, it's a legit competition. And if anything, like it's kind of more impressive. Like cross country is no fucking joke. You know what I mean? To be winning world championship goals in the cross country world champs, like that's I don't see why you wouldn't include it. It's pretty impressive to me.
Yeah. No, it's possible. I'm just thinking about that incorrectly. But 12. So yeah, that's obviously, I mean, Kipchoge and Gebrselassie have score 0 on both of those. World major marathon wins, 2 for Bekele, and 22 in total. So if you compare that to Kipchoge, for example, he has 2 Olympic golds in the marathon, 2016 and 2020. He has only 1 world champs gold on the track in the 5K in 2003. But this is where he dominates, obviously, on the road in the world major marathons with 11 wins, 5 in Berlin, 4 in London, 1 in Tokyo, and 1 in Chicago to score a total of 14 wins on the win score. And Gebrselassie, 2 Olympic golds in the 10,000, 1996 and 2000. World champs golds, 4, 1993, 5, 7, and 9 in the 10,000. World champs cross country, 0, and major marathon wins, 4. He won 4 Berlin marathons for a total win score of 10. So on the win score, Bekele is a long way in front. And when you add in, yeah.
Quick question. Do you know how many world championship cross country races Gebrselassie and Kipchoge ran?
Let's have a look. I'm looking at so World Cross Country Champions for Gebrselassie up here. He came second in the under 20 race in 1992, and it's not mentioned any others on the World Athletics profile. Kipchoge World Cross Country Championships. He won the under 20 race, but nothing else mentioned. Fourth, sorry, in the long course race in 2004 in the open division. So It looks like he did run it a few times and came top 10 a couple of times. He came fifth in 2005. But other than that, nothing mentioned on his profile. So,
Yeah, because
yeah.
obviously you understand obviously why I'm asking that. Like, it'd be a big
Yeah.
difference if they just said, I'm just not going to run it like ever again. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because then it would be a weird way to, but yeah, I mean, if they're running it and they're just not winning it, then yeah, obviously that is different.
Yep. World records, if you factor in the world records, it actually gets even stronger of a case for Bekele because Bekele had the 5,000 world record and the 10,000 world record and broke it multiple times. He held the 5,000 world record for a total of 16 years and 11 days.
Yeah.
The 10,000 world record for a total of 14 years and 363 days. So he's held world records for a cumulative time of over 30, almost, I think over 31 years. Whereas Kipchoge only held the marathon world record twice for a total of 5 years and 22 days.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely got to be um another argument when you're thinking of the greatest distance. If we're talking about the greatest marathoner
This
of
is
all
where it's
time,
important to distinguish between what
yeah,
you're ranking.
right.
Yeah.
There's no question. Like it's got to be Kipchoge, but we're not. We're talking about the greatest long distance runner, and I think the versatility has to come into it. You know how good you are over those other distances too, the 5, the 10, the half, what you're looking. And yeah, Bekele is just like what he did over the 5 and the 10 and then transition and still did it in the marathon. Like it's just insane. Like it's insane. And again, the longevity. And like you said, not just the longevity, but how long that record stands for. Of course, people can argue like, we look at certain records that last a really long time, and then we look at them in a different, through a different lens, like the women's, what is it, the women's 800, right? That,
Oh yeah, 153 from back in the late 70s or
yeah,
early 80s or whenever it was. Yeah.
yeah, stuff like that, or the 1500 or whatever. Um, yeah, of course, you look at it through a different lens. But um, nah, look, these lads are tested up to the eyeballs, I'm sure. Bekele, Gebrselassie, and Kipchoge, and yeah, holding those two records, the 5,000 and the 10,000 for 16 and 14 years, respectively. That's pretty insane. That's
It
pretty
is.
insane. And then to go and turn it over to the marathon, and it's not like he was a joke in the marathon. He's still winning world majors. Got so close to, man, you know what? I think it would be way less of an argument if he had a run that, if he got a few seconds closer. What was he, like 5 seconds off the world record at the
In
time for
the
the
at the
marathon?
He was two
At the
seconds
time,
off. Yeah.
2 seconds, yeah. I think that would, oh, imagine he had run 2 seconds quicker, like, and then he added that, a marathon world record too. Like that's insane.
Yeah.
That's pretty insane. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, go on. You were still breaking down the stats. I just wanted to kind of jump in with that part of it, because we didn't really talk about the versatility when you're talking about the greatest distance runner.
Versatility is such a big part of this,
Yeah.
spreading across the distances. Because let me just quickly go to another runner while we're on the topic of versatility, who scores very highly, but isn't even in the mix, isn't even in the conversation, and that's Mo
You know
Farah.
him. Yeah, I knew you were gonna say him. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Mo Farah has won more Olympic golds and world champs golds than any of those three other athletes that we're talking about, total of 10. So Kipchoge has only three. So this is Olympic golds and world championship golds.
Yeah.
Bekele has eight. Haile Gebrselassie has six. But Mo Farah has 10. He's won four Olympic golds and six world champs golds. He's also won a world major marathon, but he never really stepped up to the marathon and dominated in any sort of fashion like Kipchoge, or really, he hasn't, his best is 205. Bekele ran 201 and ran multiple 203s and 204s. So Farah is an example of someone that just the versatility and also the longevity. I'll get more to him in a minute. Just weren't quite there. But back to the world records. Haile Gebrselassie, he's held the 5,000 world record for 2 years and 231 days, the 10,000 world record for 12 years and 77 days. And he also broke the world record 27 times in total. So oftentimes he was breaking his own world record though. And that actually also spans to indoor races as well. So yeah, it's tough to really to pick exactly, how you want to weight all of these factors. And I think talking to the longevity is really important as well. And just a quick point on this. Kipchoge, there was 20 years span between his 5,000 gold medal at the World Championships and his Berlin Marathon win in 2023. So
That's
20
insane.
years of
That's
being at the
insane.
top of the sport.
Yeah, that's fucking wild. That's wild. I was going to bring that up actually. I was going to bring up Kipchoge's longevity argument to fight because I feel like I'm just arguing with myself, right? I'm literally like, oh, Bekele has this or Kipchoge has this or, but yeah, no, the 20-year span is absolutely wild. And what about this? This is more of a question for you. I thought about this for Kipchoge. Over that 20-year span, he is bridging that gap between non-super shoes to, pre-super shoes to super shoes and still consistently winning and then doing it against, you know, what could be argued, and I want to see your opinion on this, some of the deepest fields, certainly in marathons in the latter half ever, right? Like, what do you
Mhm.
think about those two things as arguments?
Yeah, I mean, he's won the Olympics twice, right? 2016 and 2020. So, even though those fields aren't quite as deep as some of the major marathons, because they can only obviously select three from each country. So the Berlin marathons that he's won and the London marathons that he's won are technically deeper. Yeah, I mean, I think Kipchoge really starts to score very, very highly on you know, the overall impact of the sport and just the pure like versatility as well. Because when you think about it from the standpoint of just like influence from social media and from media in general, and especially, from his 2018 159 40 Ineos challenge, like these are the areas where Kipchoge is just dominating the other two. But you could argue if social media was around earlier, or if someone like Bekele and Gebrselassie were in the peak of their careers later when social media became a thing, who knows what it would look like, because Kipchoge really had the rise of social media to really leverage. And NN Running Team have done such a phenomenal job of, positioning him, because as we've spoken about in the past, like we all know that, in case you don't know, it's probably not him posting most of the time. It's he's having people, make these captions and these photos. And, this wasn't possible in the era of Bekele and Gebrselassie, because this was just pre, smartphones. In Gebrselassie case, it was, pre-internet for some of his early dominations. So I think just the awareness of Kipchoge and the understanding and, just being able to share content around amongst people, I think is a really important point, because these things weren't really possible for the other two. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. And then I looked at, so, because I'm looking at the top, because I'm looking more at the super shoe thing. I'm trying to analyze that. Um, he won the 2016 Rio 2016 in super shoes, right? That was when the three lads, him, Rupp, and I can't remember the other runner, they all had the super shoes on and they all podiumed, right? And that was the big kind of like, that was when the argument came out like, this is doping. Super shoes are doping. Like, this is not fair, blah, blah, blah. Three men wear them, three men get on the podium, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
But then his first major win was Chicago, right, in 2014. So it's not like the super shoes just turned it on for him. Like, he was still doing it pre super shoes over the marathon. Um, and so, but then, I could still see someone argue like, yeah, he turned it on for Chicago, but then the super shoes are being made, and obviously they're being made with him in mind. He's doing all the prototypes, and then he takes off. They've always been, the Vaporflies and then the Alpha Flies came after the 4% and this, that, and the other. and they've always been molded kind of around him with him in mind from the beginning. And so I could honestly, I'm not saying I'm making this argument, but I could see someone make that argument, be like, hey, he's kind of had this, certainly over the marathon, he's had this super shoe advantage, which has been molded for him for
Yeah.
forever, for as long as they've ever existed. Um, I could see that argument, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean he was at the peak of his career just as this new technology was coming out on the market and yeah, there's no doubt because yeah, I think the question mark around what he was wearing that day when he ran 1:59:40 is still a mystery to this day in terms of what exactly were on his feet super shoe wise. But yeah, look, it's an interesting discussion and it's something that I feel almost anyone listening to this and anyone just being asked the question would immediately say Kipchoge is the greatest distance runner of all time. But you know, someone for like Haile Gebrselassie, for example, he's had a lot of like a lot of influence on the sport. He created the Great Ethiopian Run, annual 10K in Addis Ababa, which has grown from 10,000 participants to 45,000 participants this year. And Kipchoge hasn't sort of really done anything like that yet. Yeah, there's so many different ways you can view this, and if you look at it just from the standpoint, sort of repeating myself, just from the standpoint of statistics and wins and world records, then you have to say that Kenenisa Bekele is the greatest distance runner of all time. But if you look at it more from influence and things that aren't really measured, I think Kipchoge is very difficult to go past. But yeah.
So if you had to, just for an answer, gun to the head, who would you pick out of those three?
I would pick Bekele
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree.
purely based on the stats, and I think holding those two world records for a cumulative total of over 31 years, I think that's
Uh,
something that maybe a lot of people don't place a strong weight on. But 5,000, 10,000, two events that we saw so many top distance runners come and attempt at breaking those world records, and to be honest, most people, there wasn't a lot of people that came overly close. And Joshua Cheptegei ultimately broke them both in races that were set with the new super spikes. They were set with the pacing lights. So those were things that Bekele didn't have back then.
oh,
So Bekele very well may have still been holding those world records to this day if the super spikes and the wave lights weren't a thing. You never know. So yeah, it's I would go with Bekele. What about you?
I think I would lean that way, honestly, too. If I had to pick, absolutely had to, and not, yeah, him and Hall, I'd go Bekele. Yeah.
Hmm.
Just for what we were saying, what I was saying earlier, just the versatility part. You
Yeah.
know, he could do it all. He really could. And I really do think that's a big part of why we didn't see more and haven't seen more major marathon wins because I really don't think he took it as serious. I
Yeah,
really don't
exactly.
think. And I think had he committed to it the way he committed to his track days and everything like that pre-marathon, or committed the way Kipchoge committed, I really don't think it would even be a debate, honestly.
Hmm. Because before, I'm looking forward to some of the comments on the YouTube channel about this, but people might go, oh, but Bekele never really did that much over the marathon. But you could sort of argue the same way for Kipchoge never doing all that much on the track. Even though
Yeah.
he did do a lot on the track, he only won one World Champs gold, as mentioned a couple of times, 5K in 2003. He did medal quite a few times, but he didn't do anything else. All of his statistics are so heavy on the marathon, the Olympic golds and all the world major wins and the world records. It's all weighted at the marathon. So back to your comment, like if you're talking about who's the greatest marathoner of all time, there's just no question. Like it's very clear. But who's the greatest distance runner of all time? And distance running really is, you could argue it's 1,500 meters upwards to the marathon, or it's 5K upwards to the marathon. But either way, uh, Bekele still did win two major marathons, and he still did run 2:01 and just missed the world record. So yeah, it's it really depends on which way you view this, and it's just such a shame for Bekele that he never was able to put together any more than that one good marathon in Berlin in 2019. Because if he just had a couple more attempts at it, injury free, and got out of him what I think many people believe that he could have run a little bit quicker than what he ran, then I think more people would believe that Bekele was the greatest distance runner of all time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mo Farah is an interesting one to look at, though. As mentioned before, most Olympic golds and world champs, as mentioned, win score 11 in total, including his Chicago marathon victory in 2018. But he doesn't really contend for the win, as he never really performed in the marathon to the level of the other three. And he really falls short with longevity as well, because his career was only sort of 2011 to 2017, where he was sort of at the very top in the 5K and the 10K, whereas the other three, including Gebrselassie, were really dominating. You can sort of look at their span of winning over 15 plus years. So, all right. So our answer on for both of us is Bekele. I'd love to hear
Yeah,
your in the comments.
absolutely. And then just on Mo Farah, that Chicago that he won, that's still the British record, is it right? Is that right?
Yeah.
205, whatever.
205.22 or something like that. We could look it up, but it's 205. Yeah, mid.
Gotcha, gotcha. And is it Emil Koresh? Like he got close. Did he recently?
Milcrest has
Did he?
he's run 2.6. Yep. The
Okay.
interesting thing will be, I'm glad you brought that up, because Phil Sessman, who I've done the deep dive into his training that we'll talk about over on the Shareholders Club, he mentioned on his last video, his YouTube series, which is going on at the moment, which is very entertaining, that he hopes to run 2.6 or potentially 2.5 at
Yeah.
Valencia. So
Yeah.
we'll see. That record may go down at Valencia. We'll see. Mm.
Yeah.
So after Kenya clean swept the podium at the New York Marathon in both the men's and the women's race, top three in both, my brother actually, who isn't a runner, he actually asked me, when was the last time someone won a major marathon who was not from East Africa, who was not from Kenya or Ethiopia or Uganda? And I did a bit of a search, and I had a feeling it was Yuki Koichi in 2018, which it was, and Des Linden also won that same year. Bit of a unusual year, obviously, with the weather being
Yeah.
being
Everyone
so
dropped out.
difficult. Everyone dropped out. Not everyone, but at least most of the East
Yeah.
Africans dropped out. But before that, I'm not sure. I couldn't find any male marathon, any on the male side in the marathon that have won that's not from East Africa. And on the women's side, Paula Radcliffe is the next one in 2003. So this got me thinking,
Well,
and it got us chatting. Yeah,
I thought we just mentioned Mo Farah at Chicago. No?
born in Somalia.
Oh, you're including, yeah, okay. So that was what I was gonna, oh, sorry, the video dropped. That's what I was gonna say. Like he's British, but yeah, he's not. He is and he isn't. You know what I mean? Obviously he's British, but I get what you're saying. From the argument's point of view, we're talking about, because a big part of what we're going to talk about has to do with actual genetic makeup, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Genetics of these Africans and things like that. And so, yeah, okay,
Oh,
fair enough.
if you're talking about major marathon winners from nationality wise, I mean, there's loads. There's Abdi Nagy, who's born in
Yeah.
Somalia, I believe, Netherlands. There's obviously Sifan Hassan,
Oh,
who
yeah. Yeah.
who competes for the Netherlands. But I'm talking about runners that are born outside of East Africa. And I mean, technically, Somalia is not, according to AI, it's not actually in East Africa either. But let's talk about people that from outside Africa. So yeah, it was it got us talking about, can Americans, Asians, and Europeans ever really match East Africans over the marathon, the long distances? And I know that you had a few thoughts about this, Luke. So I'll let you get started on the answer.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, because there is a lot going on, right? And it's definitely something that I thought we always kind of talk about and like dance around a little bit, but to actually like dive into it, like it's important. And of course, we're never going to get an answer, right? We don't know this for a fact. So it's all opinions and stuff. So, no one freak out about what we're about to say. But based upon everything, right? I feel like I'll give it kind of like the law school answer. You gotta state your answer, then give your argument, then you back up why you gave the answer. And so to give the answer for me, the question rather would be, can Westerners, Europeans, Americans, or even Asians for that matter, catch up with East Africans? And for me, the answer would be no. And of course, there's so many reasons why. There's so many gray areas, but some of the main reasons, and I think one of the main reasons would have to be, you know, we'll get into the genetic makeup, but it kind of goes hand in hand with the cultural differences, right?
Mhm.
They're born and raised at crazy elevation. You're looking at over 7,000 feet, 7,000, sometimes upwards of 9,000 feet elevation. And that already is wild, right? But it's one thing to you can be at 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet, and be in a place like, Bogota, Colombia, right? That's over 8,000 feet. Why don't they have, right? Is it because of the genetic? Maybe, but it's more the next part. It has to do with the cultural differences, right? You go out, you've been there, you go out in the roads in Kenya, in Ethiopia, like they're just running everywhere. And it's not because they're told to, it's not because they have to, it's not because, they read a story about Gebrselassie or about Kipchoge, and they're like, I want to be like my hero. It's not because of any of those things. That's just their way of life. And that's just it for so many of them. Are there exceptions? Of course, there's exceptions. There's exceptions to everything. But that is their way of life. They walk, they run everywhere. And you go out for a run, when you're there's going to be kids just jumping on the pack, just for the laugh, and then running next to you and running here and running to school and running back. And so you have that in all together, then of course, that's going to be the difference of what I said, 8,000 feet in Kenya, a little Kenyan kid versus 8,000 feet in Bogota, Colombia, a little Colombian kid. Why are they so different? That's one of the main things, right? Another thing why they're so different definitely then would be the genetic makeup, right? Sticking to the Colombian kid at 8,000 feet in Bogota, they are literally built different to the East Africans, and that's just fact. Like, it just is. The longer, trimmer limbs, the low BMI, body composition, like, and that's just the way evolution works, right? People stay in a certain area, they're going to look and feel and be shaped a certain way, you know? And all those things are all akin to that kind of running, active lifestyle, rural life where they're getting place to place. And then you add it all together with that, and then you sprinkle in, you know, their diet, right?
Mhm.
Another part of it. You think of, like, so Conor Mance, for example, he's lived kind of like that. He's lived his whole life at elevation, right? He was born and raised in Utah at elevation, went to high school there, ran competitively there, went to college there, ran competitively, ran very well there, still there. And that's all amazing. But it's still different because as Conor Mance has grown up and he's still running, there's stories of him running. I think I saw somewhere he ran like a sub 75 half marathon when he was like 13 or 14. And like, that sounds like a Kenyan kid, sounds like one of those stories. That's crazy for an American kid, but that's more of a rarity versus the Kenyan kids. You could see that happening all the time. And I think a big part of it has to do with everything what we've said there, but also Conor Mance, while he's doing that, while he has a different genetic makeup to most American kids, while he has everything else going from, he's still waking up and eating Pop-Tarts and eating pizza rolls and eating, all the shit that American kids are eating. Not happening in Kenya, even if you want to, even if you're living like a king, you know what I mean? And that, again, is just another added layer to it. the diet is just so different. Clean carbs, no no seasoning at all, just meat and meat if you're lucky, carbs and fruit and veg and water, like no fucking Gatorade full of sugar and Coke and this, that, and the other. Another layer, and then the final, those are all the layers to it, right? And then the final kind of cherry on the top is, this is my way out of poverty now.
Correct.
I have all of this going for me. Everything's set up for me. I'm built way better than everyone else. I've been running since I was been able to run, crushing it. And now I know I have something in me that I can go over to America and just absolutely bash all these white boys in this race and make money like, the money that I make, that they make, the cost of living in America. I can take this money, bring it back to Kenya, and that's it. Me and my family are set now. And so it's like this perfect kind of storm, perfect mixture, perfect combination of things that just kind of culminates that will just always be there. There's no signs of it never being there. Um, and I don't see it ever changing. And so with all those things, it's just there's nowhere else that's set up like that. Nowhere in Boulder, nowhere in Flagstaff, nowhere in St. Moritz, nowhere in whatever it might be at elevation. Like those factors are just not there for those people that live and breathe at elevation in different parts of the world, to the way it's set up for those East Africans.
Yeah, I think you summarized that really well. And yeah, it's probably no secret that most Kenyans living rurally, they're mostly earning between sort of 1,000 and 3,000 US dollars a year outside of the capital cities. And if they get the opportunity to go to a major marathon and perform well, they very well may take home 10 to, if they win, upwards of 100 to $150,000, which is just so, which is such a big deal to them. It's completely life changing. Whereas that sort of money is very similar to the average, not the average salary. Well, I obviously gave a big bracket there, but there's such a small chance, I guess, for someone from the West to earn that kind of money in running, but there's just so much opportunity elsewhere to earn that sort of money and long term in your career. Running has such a short, lifespan. It's only really, upwards of sort of 20 years in the case of Kipchoge, but in most people's cases, they can perform at their best for 10 years, and I think it's just that incentive is such a big deal as well. And yeah, you summarized that pretty well. There's no real opportunities in Kenya that I've heard about that are anywhere near as lucrative as running. I mean, there probably is potentially in football, but other than that, there's probably nothing
That's another
else.
good point.
Mm,
That's another really good point, actually. I didn't bring up. That's a good point where you're saying there, like in the US, it's like it's oversaturated with sports, right?
mm.
Like I'm raising a kid in the US. It's like too much. There's almost too many options. Dance, swimming, soccer, softball, cheer, and all those options, if you get really, really, really good at it, there's an opportunity to make a serious career and a serious living. Um, and then if she doesn't want to do that, you know, lawyer, doctor, this, that, and in Kenya, it's just like, gotta run,
Yep.
gotta run. That's it.
It's really in
Yeah.
yeah, in these. I've been to Kenya, I think 6 times, and Ethiopia once. And there's really, there's very little, there's hardly any other path to take other than running. It's just completely ingrained in the culture, especially in those hubs like Saluta in Ethiopia and Iten, Kaptagat in Kenya. It's really the only path you can take. So I think the incentive part is such a big deal. And we've spoken about this before in the context of doping as well, right? When it comes to taking that risk, because if it doesn't work out for you, you do take that risk and you do get popped. It's really just back to what you were going to do anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah, interesting discussion. And yeah, we'll switch over to the discussion about Phil Sessman's training towards Valencia Marathon. I've done a full analysis on his build up to the Amsterdam Marathon, where he ran a PB 2:07:16. We'll talk about all of that over on the Shareholders Club. Hope that you can join us over there. Thank you once again for listening in this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Sweat Elite podcast. And yeah, we'll speak to you next week.